We're live, 10:52. So the morning motivation, get some projects done. Working on the behind the scenes computer versions of getting projects done, make calls and stuff like that. But all of that obviously is very important. So I'm excited about the possibility of running that 6.8 liter 2-valve motor, possibly even in the car, which would be cool as a small twin turbo or a single turbo, whatever fits. Excuse me. But because these motors are made for torque, it got me thinking about torque production down low and how much you can like really put down. So I was looking at some of the data that I have from big block Chevys run with, and the thumbnail that I have up is a VORTECH with a junkyard big block that had been modified that has a VORTECH on it. And I was looking at the torque curves and then kind of comparing them to other combinations, big block combinations, cam to big blocks with heads and stuff on them, where I've run turbos on them. And, if you take a look at the videos that I have up, I have direct comparisons of running a centrifugal and a turbo or turbos and a twin screw and a roots blower, all in the same combination, same boost, same RPM, same air fuel, same timing, all that stuff. So you can see exactly what they do. And I did that for that reason. And the reason that I did that is because you can see the difference in the boost curves supplied by each, because I have boost curves in the video, and then also the attending power curves. And we know, because of the parasitic losses associated with driving the supercharger, and at these higher power levels, it's not 20 or 30 horsepower difference. It's like 120 or 200 horsepower difference. And I know because I've run these tests. I've run them on a small little B series. We ran them on a 464 valve modular Ford, and also on a small block Ford. I'd like to redo the test on an LS application too, just because we have that. I mean, we know the results are going to be the same. The turbo at any given boost level makes more power. The other thing that happens on a centrifugal blower application is that we have a rising boost curve. So it'll be very low at, say, 2,000 RPM or 2,500, and then it'll reach its peak, usually at whatever the maximum engine speed is. So let's say 6,500. A turbo, if you have the wastegate controller set so that it makes the same boost, the same peak boost as the centrifugal did, what it's going to do is it's going to come up on boost, and then if you have a good controller, just maintain whatever that peak boost is for a lot of the RPM range. So what happens is, typically when we run these things like this, what happens is in the middle part of the curve where the turbo has spooled up and it's maintaining the boost level, you'll see a big difference in boost, say at 3,000 or 3,500 or 4,000, between the two forms of supercharging. And so if one of them has more boost and doesn't have the parasitic loss, there's a big torque difference on a turbo application compared to a centrifugal blower application in that range. And we know that, and we've talked about that many times. That's not really my question. And the putting the V10 in the Mustang got me thinking about available traction, especially on street tires, especially with a street suspension, something that's not designed just to like hook and cook. It's not set up just to go to the track. It has big slicks on it. It weight transfers. It does all the things that it's supposed to. And then the question is, I started looking at the numbers on some of the big block stuff. So like on a centrifugal blower application on a 454 or something, we might have, and especially on a 496, we might have, at 3,000 or 3,500 RPM, we may have 700 foot-pounds of torque there. So, if you have a 3,000 RPM stall converter or a stick car, and you're, revving it up and dumping the clutch, sidestepping it, as it were, or just accelerating from that RPM range, how much can you actually put down? So let's say that we had a centrifugal supercharged big block, and we have a turbo big block, and at 3,000 RPM, the centrifugal is making, 650 foot-pounds, but the turbo is making 750 foot-pounds. Can you put that other 100 foot-pounds of torque down? Can you, in a street car, do you have the kind of traction that's required to utilize what's there? I know ultimately the turbo is going to make more power at any given boost level, and it will make more power. My question isn't about that. My question is, can you utilize what you get where you get the big gains down low from stuff like that? And then and a roots blower thing would come into play there too, because compared to a centrifugal, it will have a lot more low speed power. But so the question is, this will be our poll. So the question is, can you put down an extra 100 foot-pounds of torque at 3,000 RPM if you already have 650 to deal with? So we'll ask our community. And that's why I was looking at the big block stuff. And that's kind of like why I like going and looking back at these torque curves, because I can kind of see what's happening and go, yeah, look, we know that as a general thing, we all want more, right? Everybody wants to have more torque. Okay, yeah, more is better, because then, and I've even talked about this, because we can always come off the throttle and make it less. But if we're already at wide open throttle and it has what it has, we can't make it more. But there's more to the question than that. What if you already can't go to wide open throttle? What if you can't go to wide open throttle with what you have? Can you use more? Like on a street car, is it just ridiculous to have 750 instead of 650 foot-pounds, especially down at 3,000 RPM, which where bigger motors would obviously really be excelling? And I was thinking about this 6.8 liter. If we had, this thing's not going to make very much power. I mean, it could make 300 or 350 at the tire, let's say NA on a 2-valve anyway in the Ford, which is not a lot. I mean, a good 302 easily does that. And then if you put turbos on it, let's say that we had 500 at the tire, 500 horsepower at the tire, which is enough to have a lot of fun in a street car. But it's also going to have at least 700 foot-pounds of torque, because this thing easily makes like 150 more foot-pounds of torque than it does horsepower. And it's going to be even more so with the turbo, and even more so if we run E85 in this thing. So we'll have an overabundance of torque essentially, and then we'll have not much RPM to deal with unless we were to put cams. A short rudder manifold is going to help that thing rev out, maybe all the way out to 5,000 RPM, but still, it's going to be a torque monster. But can we accentuate the torque production too much in that RPM range and not be able to deal with it effectively? Could we? You can't on something that makes 750 foot-pounds of torque at 3,000 RPM, you can't just dump the clutch on something like that and then expect it to hook up. It's not going to do that. That's just going to be way too much. And maybe if we have a 247 gear and you launch it in 4th gear or something, maybe it would do that. But it's, you're going to have trouble dealing with that. So and then the thing to think about is, and the reason that I ask this is on a centrifugal blower application, we obviously, we made 700, 800, whatever, 900 horsepower, whatever we make with these things. Does it make more sense to tailor this is the boost delivery is kind of our form of traction control in this thing. And the other thing that happens, the thing that I liked about having a centrifugal blower on my Mustang particularly, was that it was actually less likely to detonate nailing the throttle at lower engine speeds, because you didn't have like you roll in get on the throttle in 5th gear or whatever, you don't have lots of boost, but you also don't have to worry about the thing rattling itself to death like you would with some of these positive displacement blowers, which had a lot more boost and potentially had more charge air and those kinds of things there too. So tuning becomes more critical when you're making more low speed power. I didn't have to worry about that so much with the VORTECH. I mean, not that we didn't tune it, we did, but even back then the tuning was pretty rudimentary. It was a 36-pound injectors ultimately and a 36-pound meter. And before that, it was a 24-pound meter and 24-pound injectors and an FMU. And in all these cases, we had a boost retard deal on it. not until the very end of me driving that car did I ever have a tuned chip or anything. And it was just a factory A9L computer and all of these workarounds, I like to call them. But the thing is, like I said, I could run it on regular 87, and it would have been even better had I taken more timing out of it, because it would rattle under boost on 87, but not on 91. And that's what it got, most of the time. Sometimes as I'm just driving to work and stuff, I would put cheap stuff in it just, so that you could. But on a big block, that would be even more noticeable. And so again, I'm just thinking about specific applications. Can we tailor our acceleration rate with the boost curve? And you might be able to do that with a turbo with the right kind of boost controller and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what guys think about that. Too much is never enough. That's right. So what I'm hearing is we're testing the V10 with two different kinds of boost levels. I probably will not put a VORTECH or anything on the V10. I don't think. Maybe on the engine dyno, it could get, if the guys at Kenny Bell, if Mike over there can hook me up with one of those, we could do that. Been waiting all day. I'm sorry. I would have got on earlier if I would have known you were waiting. Okay, both of those closed out. That's good. Centrifugals are pretty legit for a daily perspective. I liked my VORTECH on my Mustang. I think it worked really, really well. Although after I drove a turbo one, it was also really, really nice. I've run a PAXTON. I have a turbo car currently. I've driven 871 Roots 454. Got to say, all around fun would be a turbo, but I hate the plumbing and the heat. What we need is a turbo with a spool shot force feeding a centrifugal. I don't know why you want to feed the centrifugal. Tuned to G8 with a TORQSTORM, small cam, stock converter, 8 PSI. The owner thought it was... Yeah, that you warned him about the low speed torque. Yeah, the centrifugal just doesn't have... It just doesn't have boost down at 2,500. And it will always, no matter what you do, it's always going to have less down there than it does up top. I know guys are going to bring up, yeah, but what if you wastegate it? Even if you wastegate it, you have a difference in blower speed. From 2,000 RPM to 6,000 RPM, you have a big change in blower speed. And even if you speed it up at 2,000 RPM, you're not going to pulley it so that it makes the RPM that it does at 6,000. You won't be able to do that, and then just limit it. People haven't done the math on that. You can make it better. Like you can raise the boost up here, but you're not going to go whoop and make the curve flat. That's not going to happen. For a truck, which would provide better fuel economy at similar boost level? If you're in boost, you're not getting good fuel economy anyway. So if you're trying to get fuel economy in a truck, especially in a gas-powered truck, you want to be in vacuum. The centrifugal, compared to a turbo, would probably get worse mileage because you're having to drive the blower, even though having a blow-off valve would help that. But you're still having to spin the blower. So ultimately, and you're not doing anything to the turbo, basically, if you're cruising under vacuum. Speaking of torque, would a centrifugal supercharger give a diesel the top end it needs? I don't think so. A diesel just doesn't have RPM potential. And they usually don't have cam timing and valve train to run up there either. I mean, it would have top end. If by top end you mean it runs to 3,000 or 3,500 or 4,000 RPM. Although some of the newer ones are probably higher than that. Does the gradual increase of blower make for a more reliable ET? Is the equivalent turbo car more volatile? The thing that people deal with on these mostly is available traction. You see a lot of ProCharge cars on these Street Outlaws stuff for this reason, because you can't, their limit is not power production. Their limit is, how much of this on average can I put down through the run? How much traction do I have to put down what kind of power I can make? And since they can't do it, at the bottom of the curve and at lower vehicle speeds, they can put down less as you get higher, as you go faster and faster, you can put down more and more. And the centrifugal supercharger kind of does that by design. Trick will be not breaking parts. Yeah, it's always like that, especially shock loading stuff when you're drag racing. What is streetable on a 6-liter LY6 with the S480, 1200 horsepower capable, but 410 gears and 6-speed? What do you mean, what is streetable? Are you asking about a camshaft or something? Mark got something common. I hear I can't get any traction, so I need more power. That's the answer for everything. My brakes aren't that good. You know what I need is I need more power. The transmission's definitely going to break. You know what I need? I need more power. There, Aaron, I don't have any frosty cold beverage. Just a little early for that. Alan, today's your Friday. That's good. Happy Friday. TGIF. Turbo Central, you got your water to air cooler setup? Nice. $51.49. That's a win. Was it 2 inches or 2 feet? Is that Vin Diesel? I would say from experience that with our innovative boost controller, we could tailor our turbo bike. Yeah, if you can do it in gear dependent and RPM dependent boost control, that works good. Richard, have you read up on the fresh air turbine anti-lag system Subaru use? No, I've read up on some of the anti-lag stuff, but not that one. Marvin, thanks for coming in. Dean, the Chrysler guys did that back in the mid 80s with the turbo 2.2s. Did boost and timing control to keep the transaxles alive. I don't understand this pull. Another 100 foot-pounds of torque is just a little more airflow. Okay. But if you already have 650 and that's too much to deal with, and now you have another 100, that's more to deal with. It's pretty easy to understand. My turbo LS swap 2nd gen Firebird will not get traction until 88 miles an hour. Is that when it goes back in time? Would a centrifugal help? It would have less. You probably have a lot more boost than a centrifugal will. I don't know what RPM that's at. You could have a Fresca. Spalding. You know, are regular pals. 58%. Can you put down an extra 100 foot-pounds of torque at 3,000 if you already have 650? 58% are saying they could put it down. I'm picking up what you're putting down. Yeah, they took they torque limited these things on the 2.2s and the 2.5s to have them produce much less torque, initial torque, so that to save these things, to save the transaxles. They beefed up the transaxles too, but they did that first to stop them. Aaron, I agree. We know why people like turbos. We're talking about one specific element, or zooming in on one thing. Underdog guys that have tried to deal with what I'm talking about would understand that. I know that I'm going to have that problem, and I think back to even when I had the Bridgestone tires that we were running on my Mustang with a road race suspension and trying to get that thing hooked up at Terminal Island before we ran it in the Long Beach Grand Prix. And so the car would run, ran 1220s or something, but at like 129 or 130 miles an hour because it had a, 2.4 60-foot time or something. It was just, it just wouldn't transfer. It didn't transfer weight and didn't hook up because the tires were stones. We call them stones. So you couldn't put power down, but it would just storm once you could. And that even had a centrifugal blower on it, which helped things out. Dawson, I don't know about what's going on with the Camry. Getting extra fuel is actually fairly easy. You can do two things. You can go with a little bit bigger injector and then a rising rate regulator like an FMU, so that you can dump fuel at it when you add boost. But the thing I don't know about on that 97 Camry, if anybody has access to that computer so they can tune it, or if there's another way to trick it to take timing out of it. Because that's what you'll need to do. That will be the critical element. Getting fuel to it is not going to be hard, but taking timing out that you would need to do is going to be a little bit more difficult. That's always the deal, is you want to make sure that the timing is really what's going to kill the thing. So why didn't this thing take my, there we go. And I think we'll have in the Mustang, in the street car, we'll definitely have an issue with traction with that if we put that especially if we do a twin turbo 6.8 liter, it'll have an awful lot of torque. Yep, Stone Cold Steve Austin, except without all the bite. What do we got going on here? But it'll be fun. I mean, and it will be cool. What is cool about having torque like that is rolling on in higher gears at higher vehicle speeds, because then you just, you're like, whoa, kind of like a turbo diesel thing. Yeah, Roman, I'm thinking about putting it in the 88 5-liter LX. original owner. And then the other consideration on the, if we put that in there, Bart has a factory harness and a factory computer from like a van, from a V10 van that they have tuned. And so I could run this thing with like a factory harness and a mass air and stuff. I don't know about fitting all that. And I don't know about blowing through the mass air meter. We'll have to see. Otherwise, I just run it as a speed density with the Holly. Tony, yeah, I was on the Fastest Car episode. Well, I wasn't. Chad was, and I was just helping him with making power. That was a fun deal. Are you sure the guy in New Mexico still has it? Yeah, he does. But I do need to go get it. It's been sitting for a long time. But, you know, road trips. With a 3-link and good tires, might be surprised on how well it hooks. It's not going to hook well on with a road race suspension. I remember trying to do that even on, we had, when I did the Foxtrot deal with the VORTECH on my engine, on my street car, I think it went, I want to say I went 1290s at like 119. Tony, you just keep pointing at the screen. That's that guy that doesn't know anything, thinks every cam's a turbo cam. What the heck does he know? I like the seemingly trick question. The only answer, the poll question, the only answer is yes. Do you have room for all these cars at your house? No, I don't. They wouldn't be at the house. They'd have to be somewhere else. I have room for one in the garage, which is probably going to be the Omni, because that will be more of a daily driver. So waiting for the Big Bang. How far have you pushed the stock bottom end? 6 big buck in the past testing. 1,100 or so, 11 or 1,200. How do you know if you have an Iron Duke? It should be pretty easy to identify. Yeah, Matt, I have an 85 Omni GLH that we're putting the GLHS turbo stuff on. I need a shop, yeah. Java, I forgot what your combination is, but your cam recommends a 323 to 373 gear. Matt does have the boost button on the stick. Omnis don't have that. I've never seen a boost button. What button does a GLHS have? And what is it you think that the button does? No factory Shelby had that I know of. It would hold the blow off from letting off pressure. That's all news to me. I've never heard of that. The Shelby, the GLHS motor was rated at 175 horsepower, not because of a button. It was rated at that because it had a different intake. It had an intercooler. It had a different turbo. It had compared to the 85. It also had a different cylinder head, a different cam. but it was rated higher, and primarily because they ran more boost. But that was all in the factory programming. There was nothing that made them do that. You didn't push a button to do that. I do want to run an Iron Duke. I want to run an Iron Duke on the engine dyno. I just want to put it on there and run it, and then put a turbo on it. Oh, let's see. I forgot where I was. Oh no, I'm good. I'm all good. So a small block Chevy will go anywhere that an Iron Duke goes. Yeah, and I'm not even going to take it apart and put ring gap in it or do anything with it. I'm just going to put bigger injectors in it, an E85 and an intercooler and a turbo, and then just run boost on it. I've heard of a scramble button. Yeah, on an aftermarket ECU, they have that. The early SVO had an octane button so that you could push the button. I don't remember if it was on the console or on the dash, and it had an octane button so you could run it on 87 and 89 and 91 so that it would change. Did it change the boost too? I know that it changed the timing, but the SVO Mustangs had that. But the Omni didn't have any button on it that I am aware of. Does anybody know if a 1990 Grand Am had an Iron Duke? Dawson, I don't know what an MS465 transmission is. I know that I've never run one. Man, Amazon, you are just all about the climb today, aren't you? And Tesla is also. All about that climb. Live stream. I think that the 90 Pontiac was the 3100, or it wouldn't have been a 3800. It would have been they had 3100s in, and they had 3400s in the Grand Ams also. 1990 Grand Am specs, 2.3 liter double overcam 16 valve. So it had a quad 4 available in it. Base engine was a 2.5 liter. Is that what the Iron Duke is? I wish they would actually tell us something. Okay. Blue Collar, have you done much with the Gen 2 LT1? I've done a few tests with them on the engine dyno. I've never put a turbo in one, though. Overbuilt. The 2.5 is an Iron Duke? Okay. Yeah, the scramble button is just higher boost. Wet weather equals better e-commerce sale. Yeah. People want to stay in and not go out and get stuff. Where's our pull at? 64% are on the yes column. Landing a turbo or PAXTON YSI on a 363 Dart. I have videos up with both of those on that 363 that I had. We ran a turbo at about 17 pounds, and it was over 1,000 horsepower. I don't remember. I honestly don't think maybe we didn't put a blower on there, but a YSI would be 1,000 horsepower on that too. It would just take more boost to do it. Blue collar, you're going to do a rear mount turbo? They work. They definitely work. And an LT1 is a pretty good motor to begin with. That has decent heads on it. Put a camshaft in it. It's got an intake manifold that allow you to rev, and the turbos will make lots of power. And I'm sure somebody will bring up the stick record, the guys over at Tick, and I can't remember the name of the car. What the heck is the name of that thing? Somebody will throw it up there. For a rear mount turbo, yes, you can use a scavenge pump. Grub worm, that's it. Start with a PROCHARGER on my blow-through big block Chevy. Switch to turbos, pick up 25% more power at the same boost setting. Plus, you can easily dial different boost settings on the fly. It is nice. The 90 Grand Am was rear-wheel drive? It should be front-wheel drive. Let's did a mild cam, 218. Sounds good. Cool. Yeah, blue collar, that's not going to be a problem at all. Alfred, welcome if you're new to the channel. Lots of sharp guys here to ask. You can ask questions too. Lots of good information out on the internet for you to search and figure out what you're trying to learn. Where are we at? Still going. Dawson, a lot of times making the power is not the problem, but the rest of the drivetrain, making that work is going to be tough. Why is it important to stop run a code reads 1289? Does anybody know what that code? What kind of car is it, Gary? If you only care about bottom end torque, how would you spec a cam for that? Actually, and I don't know where you want it, like what RPM range you're talking about, but a cam could lose more torque, but it's going to be a rare cam that's going to gain a bunch of low speed torque compared to a stock one. Alan, and this is actually a pretty good topic. One of the things people get confused about is, and it's from all of these descriptory terms that people throw about is I want more low speed power, I want more mid range power, I want more top end power. And because we see huge gains on the top with camshafts, particularly if the rest of the combination is already sorted out with a good intake and good cylinder heads, like on an LS, we see big gains. People think that you can do that like, oh, I got 50, 60, 70 horsepower. People think that you can do that also down low with the right cam, and you can't. You can't get 50 or 60 or 70 foot-pounds of torque at 2,500 RPM with any camshaft over like a stock camshaft. It's not going to do that because the camshaft isn't really coming into play down there anyway. At 2,500 RPM, it's hard to get big gains in torque. The best way to do it is with displacement. Compression also does it. Really long intake runners, sometimes headers, and none of them are going to give you the kind of gains that we see on the top with the camshafts. You can do variable cam. That helps. Like I said, compression, E85 on really high compression stuff. You can, and then boost obviously does that too. The 5 feet that came in the Apollo LS is the LS4 all aluminum? You want a cam that makes all the torque at 500 RPM. So you want it even, you want all the torque even when the throttle's closed. And part of the reason for the the lack of understanding there is because when guys like me post these graphs, we're like, oh, look, we got all this power from a cam. Yeah, but I want that, but I want it down here. It's not going to happen from a camshaft. The LS4 is front wheel drive. Mark, which one was the daily driver you're talking about? Scroll back. I don't see it, but it means I can go to live chat. Torque converters are fun, multiplying torque and all of that. Things manuals can't do. Sometimes it takes a little while to get that sorted. Gary, is that question for me? I wouldn't have told you any code is dangerous and not to drive the car because I don't know what code that is or even what car you're talking about. I don't have all the codes memorized. All the municipal codes. P1289 is a manufacturer-specific diagnostic trouble code. In the case of Ford vehicles, it indicates cylinder head temperature sensor return a value to the powertrain control module that was greater than the signal should be during a self-test diagnostic. So I hope that helps. This was on a Ford, though. Why memorize them when you have the books and interwebs to look it up? That's right. I'm not going to memorize all that. I don't have the RAM or ROM. One of those. I don't have the storage capacity. Richard, is a 225 high port trick flow better than airflow 225 for a 408 and a TORQSTORM? Not an ASCAST. An ASCAST 225 high port is nowhere near as good as a 225 trick or airflow research head. I tested ported versions of a high port that were not bad, but they still weren't as good as the 225 airflow. I can't find the diagnostic port on my 70 CUDA. Take the bowl off and look inside there. Would a PROCHARGER be better than a turbo on a towing truck application? I don't know that a PROCHARGER is going to come into play in the RPM range where you would want extra torque to be towing anyway. It's just going to take the right tuning. So, Bill, the camshaft just times the valves to trap the energy in the cylinder. Yeah, Infamous Nova, you did miss it. It was very nitrous-y, chock full of nitrous-y goodness. Any way you could test a rapid 3D polymer intake for the US? Is that one of those short runner things? Brian, you say 862 heads are better on the 5.3, but what about the 5.3 HO that comes with 799 heads? What about it? Does that motor coming with those heads mean that those heads are better on a 5.3? Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're pointing at? Is that what you're getting at? Is that what you're insinuating? Infamous Nova, can you do the same nitrous test? Which nitrous test are you talking about? What did I do? Jones, I don't know what caused your cam and lifters to go bad. It could be debris. Would it be better to have a quicker intake valve closing with centrifugal? When I talk to people about cam profiles for a centrifugal, usually the camshaft is bigger than it is on a turbo application. That's only because a centrifugal, not because one's a blower, one's a turbo, but because a centrifugal likes more engine speed. And the more engine speed you have, the more blower speed you have, the more boost you have. So they tend to want or work better with bigger camshafts. So instead of running a cam that makes peak power at 6,000, if you run a cam that makes peak power at 6,500, not only will you have more power there, but you'll also have exponentially more power because you also have more boost. So that's what I'm looking at. I'm not I'm not looking at the valve events and what valve event is better for a, a, a supercharger that has pressure on the inlet side, but not on the exhaust side compared to a turbo. The big bang nitrous test you did on the 5.3, could you do that with all the engines? No, I won't do that. I may redo one of the big bang tests on nitrous, but probably on an LS. And are these cams and lifters, were they hydraulic flat tappets or solids? Were they rollers? What were they? Brian, I was just giving you a hard time. I wouldn't switch the heads. You're not going to see enough of a change between either one of those heads to notice a difference. If you put 862s on there with the flat top pistons that came on that motor, it'd make a little bit more power. But I don't, unless we showed you a dyno graph of that, would you even notice? You could take the heads off that you have and mill them and also get more. If you took the heads off and did some home porting, you would get more. Do you have a camshaft, which is the thing that I'd recommend for that? Either one of those heads. I usually tell people just stick with the heads that you have, unless you have, for some reason, you have a 4.8 or a 5.3 and you have 317 heads on it. And even then, with a turbo on pump gas, I probably would leave those on there. What kind of tunes do you need to bump the torque on my car for better towing experience? The thing, it's a loaded question. Is the thing tuned correctly now? Does it have the right air fuel and timing in the range that you want more towing power? What else is happening? Does it have the right intake manifold? Is it a dual plane intake manifold, which is probably what you want? Does it have a mild cam that's going to enhance power in that range? Does it have long tube headers? Does it have other things that are going to get you the power in the RPM range that you need it? And if you're up at Donner Pass, you're more than likely going to have to take fuel out of it to run at altitude, because it's probably getting richer as you go up in altitude if you started down near sea level. Steve, it depends on the length and the wall thickness of the tubing that you're using, but they get so hot that you're going to get some sag. It's a good idea to have supports. Guys build supports off of the block or the head normally. Yeah. Oh, a hydraulic flat tappet. Maybe the break-in procedure, maybe the spring rate they're using during the break-in procedure, maybe more zinc. So how's our pull? We're going to get rid of that now at 62%. Can you put down an extra 100 foot-pounds of torque if you already have 650? Can you put down 750? 62% are saying yes. They've got the traction that they need. They're all tractioned up, yo. So Tesla started at 188 and it's at 197 now. Bullish. Bully. If you had the cool Quadrajet from the Cadillac that had the the little baro sensor, the little mechanical baro sensor in it, it would take fuel away by itself. So Thumper, you've been down that road from 600 to 700 foot-pounds of launching power? Because the other thing, the torque then is getting multiplied by the gearing. So you don't want to break a cam in with over 300 pounds on the spring. Yeah. Either really low ratio rockers or light springs for the break-in. I'm curious to see on this, if we do the 6/8 swap in there with a 308 gear and a 0.56 gear, will this thing, like, will it cruise down the road at, I haven't done the calculations, but 1500 RPM, let's say, or something, at 70 miles an hour? Will it cruise down the highway? It should, with the stock cams and stuff in there, I would think. And then I wonder if it would get better fuel mileage with the long runner intake rather than an intake that we would have to make to fit under the hood. You know what? I had the oil pump off. I had the oil pump go out, so I did start it twice without the oil pump. You probably got some metal in there. Richard, where do you learn about the stock market? Just online. Just on the line. I just watched lots and lots of videos and have been practicing with this Thinkorswim app for I don't know, 6 or 8 months. But I don't know about the stock market. I wouldn't say that I I learned very little. What I'm doing is day trading, and I'm doing patterns basically. What's the mileage engine with long range? You want to lug at 1500? It's a 6.8 liter V10. And I don't know if that's the cruise RPM. It might be lower than that. But with stock cams, and it would be, you know, that should be fairly mild down there. Dan, buy Holly stock and hold it. Terry, those heads will support a lot more than 450 horsepower, obviously. And I tested those FPS heads in the big 5-liter head test that we did, so you can check them out. What would you recommend for a sealer in the rocker bolt holes after porting? On what app? If it's on an LS, I don't normally put anything on those. If it's on a big block, we put thread sealer, the liquid stuff normally. Alex, they're 1.5 thou at around. That's not optimum. Is there taper in them? Is that what you're saying? I'm thinking I want to do a cross ram for my 455 to give ethanol more time to vaporize. Okay. Is it injected or is it carbureted? Oh, it's out around front to back, so not tapering it up and down. When you put can you put a ring in there and see if it's You can't see daylight in the ring, like on one side, right? If I turbo 5.3, how much do I need to file the rings? 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. So figure 28 thousandths or so. How about would it be for me to put 706 heads on a 6.2 out of an Escalade? Did it have rec port heads on it before? I have a video up that shows the results of the power change between those two heads. So you can just go look on Richard's channel. Yeah, Thinking Man, I'm pretty sure that it's not going to fit under the stock hood. So maybe a cowl hood or something. Sid, is the 1840 a sloppy stage 2? And what size is the motor? Or is the sloppy stage 2 an 1841? Is that a sloppy stage 1? And if it's a 4.8, you're going to need a converter. Sloppy stage 2, you'll need a converter if it's a 4.8 or a 5.3. Viper V10 versus a VORTECH 8100. LS3 416, 469 cam, LS3 heads 12-1. I don't know. I'm thinking low 500s. Wilson on your 416. Tony, that's a number for any internal combustion engine. Corey, the plastic one I think is easier to break, but the copper one is harder to run. So you just have to decide. The plastic ones will last a really long time. The newer plastic stuff is good. I don't think you'll have a problem as long as you're not banging into it, as long as it's run correctly, and when you go through the firewall that it's not rubbing on a sharp edge. Should both head gaskets back on and remeasure the cylinder bore? I think you should just put it back together and run it. The balance shaft is not part of the balance of the rest of the assembly. It's taking it's taking harmonics out. Well, stock turbo 350 converter. There probably are different stock converters. But if you could, VQ35 is not going to make very much torque. So the stock converter probably will work fine. a Nomad to test the engine from the GT90. They make steel braided Teflon lines for oil pressure gauges. Copper will fatigue. Is there any benefits to running a ProCharger versus a supercharger? A ProCharger is a supercharger. Thumper, taking the 4.8 out and putting a 6.0 in is makes a big difference. Cooley, just do a search for 706 versus LS3. Alex, it doesn't matter the way that it's not a balancer. It's on an LS. It's just a damper. It's not keyed. You can put it in any direction. It's just a press fit. What type of forced induction would be better suited for a street track use? 351. There isn't one that's better. You get to pick. That's why I did all the testing. You can decide what kind of power curve that you want for your application. Dawson Gen 6 big block heads. What kind of power increase do you think you get versus peanut ports? Is the 265 the duration at 50 cam? The Gen 6 heads are going to make more power because they're going to flow more, and also they have much smaller chambers. So the compression is going to be a lot higher. It's going to be a full point higher. Alex, again, you don't have to mark the flex plate either. The flex plates, I think that the flex plate is only going to go on one way, but again, it's not, it's neutral. Turbo Centra, then if you have boost down at the stall speed, you're going to raise the stall speed of the converter anyways with power. If you have it, don't buy another one. Just put it in there and see what happens. If you have to do a converter swap, it's not a big deal. Run what you brung. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'll be back tonight. I'm working on another video today. I'm hoping I can get it up. Hopefully sending out my 6-liter to Livanor for a stroker build. Steve Relay called the supercharger a restricted plate root style. Interesting. But making the motor bigger is not going to really help it make more power. If you're limiting it with whatever's a small supercharger, it'll make more power of this part down low and in the middle. That's another video for another day. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'll be back tonight.